£5 million transferred from a Thailand-based crypto billionaire to the leader of Britain's most disruptive political force, not declared, not registered, and now sitting at the centre of two simultaneous investigations that carry the potential to fundamentally alter the trajectory of Reform UK and the man who built it. Subscribe for more analysis. Here we don't sugarcoat, we expose what others are afraid to say. The facts of the Nigel Farage donation scandal are, at their core, straightforward. Christopher Harborne, a billionaire with deep crypto wealth and residence in Thailand, gave Farage £5 million in 2024, and Farage failed to register that gift with either the House of Commons or under the framework established by the Political Parties, Elections and Referendums Act 2000, known as PPERA. The House of Commons Commissioner for Standards is now investigating. The Electoral Commission is separately considering whether to open its own inquiry. And Farage, rather than allowing lawyers to manage the situation quietly, has chosen to offer a succession of public explanations, each one replacing or supplementing the last in a way that has produced something unusual in British political scandal, a defence strategy that appears to accumulate legal problems rather than resolve them. The first explanation Farage offered was chronological. The money arrived before he was elected as an MP, before he was even a declared candidate, and therefore the implied argument runs the parliamentary rules governing declarations of interest simply did not apply. This sounds plausible on first hearing. It collapses on examination. The House of Commons rules on donations cover benefits received in the 12 months before the relevant election, which brings the timeline squarely within scope. More significantly, PPERA does not confine its reach to MPs or candidates, it extends to donations made to any member of a political party, and Farage in 2024 was not merely a member of Reform UK, he was until 2025 the controlling figure of the company that legally constituted the party itself. The boundary between the man and the movement for regulatory purposes is considerably thinner than Farage's first defence assumed. When that argument visibly struggled under scrutiny, the explanation shifted. Candidly, Farage then said the gift was purely personal, a private transaction between friends carrying no political dimension and therefore outside of the regulations designed to govern political financing. This is where the legal detail becomes genuinely important, because the House of Commons regime does contain an exemption for purely personal gifts, but that exemption is explicitly and narrowly confined to gifts from partners or family members. Harborne, as far as the public record shows, is neither. And beyond the question of relationship, there is the nature of the gift itself. £5 million in cash carries no personalised quality, no individual specificity, none of the characteristics that distinguish a personal gesture from a transfer of significant financial resource. A watch carries personal meaning. A car with a personalised plate carries personal meaning. £5 million in cash is, by its very nature, a general-purpose financial instrument, and calling it personal does not make it so. PPERA, separately, contains no exemption for personal gifts whatsoever. Under that legislation, what matters is a single legal test, whether the gift was for the recipient's use or benefit in connection with any of their political activities as a member of the party. The word personal appears nowhere in that test, which means Farage's second defence, however intuitively appealing it may sound, does not engage with the actual legal standard being applied. A third layer of explanation then emerged, one that attempted to reframe the purpose of the £5 million entirely. Farage argued that the gift was designated for personal security, that he faced genuine and sustained physical threats, that no publicly funded protection was available to him, and that Harborne's contribution addressed that gap. The security framing is not without emotional resonance, but as a legal argument it faces two distinct problems. Under PPERA, the question is not what the money was designated for in the donor's mind, but whether it was used for Farage's benefit in connection with his political activities. Personal protection accompanying a party leader through speaking engagements, media appearances, campaign events, and public advocacy is, by any reasonable interpretation, protection deployed in the service of political activity. The moment Farage's security detail accompanied him to a platform appearance where he was advocating for Reform UK, that protection became connected to his political activities, regardless of what name was given to the original purpose of the gift. Under the House of Commons rules, the framing is even more direct. Members must register any gift that might reasonably be thought by others to influence a member's actions or words as a member. The critical phrase is "might reasonably be thought of." This is an objective standard focused on public perception and reasonable inference, not on the donor's subjective intention or the recipient's assurances of independence. A member of the public observing a £5 million transfer from a political donor to a party leader, whatever the stated historical rationale, is not being unreasonable in wondering whether gratitude or the hope of future generosity might shape the recipient's parliamentary conduct. That reasonable inference is precisely what the registration requirement exists to address. Under PEPRA, the backward-looking argument is even more exposed, because the legislation nowhere restricts its application to gifts connected with future political activities. A gift connected with past political activities is still connected with political activities, and Farage's own characterization of the gift as a reward for his Brexit campaigns is, read carefully, an acknowledgement of exactly that connection. The fifth and most recent explanation, that the gift was unconditional, carrying no strings, no obligations, no expectations of future behavior, attempts to close the circle by arguing that the absence of conditions removes any regulatory concern. But unconditional gifts are not exempt from the registration requirements that apply to either the Code of Conduct or PEPRA. The conditionality of a gift is legally irrelevant to the central questions under investigation. What matters under the Code is whether a reasonable observer might think the gift could influence an MP's behavior. What matters under PEPRA is whether the gift was connected with political activities. Neither of those tests is satisfied or defeated by whether the donor attached formal conditions to the transfer. Each explanation Farage has offered has been tested against the actual text of the rules that govern him, and each one fails at a different point of contact with those rules. What is notable is not just the individual weakness of each argument, but the cumulative pattern they create, a succession of shifting rationales that collectively demonstrate an absence of any single coherent account of why a £5 million gift required no declaration. In a political environment with functioning norms around financial transparency, the appropriate response to this situation would likely have involved early acknowledgement, legal advice taken privately, and a recalibration of public positioning. Instead, what has emerged is a public communications approach that appears to prioritize the maintenance of support among existing reform voters over the resolution of the underlying regulatory questions. That approach carries its own logic. Farage has built a political movement on the premise that scrutiny of him is inherently politically motivated, and that premise insulates him from the normal consequences of public accountability within his own coalition. But it does nothing to address the investigations themselves, which are not conducted by party members and are not susceptible to the same rhetorical framework. The House of Commons Commissioner for Standards and the Electoral Commission operate on the basis of rules and evidence, not political allegiance, and the defences that sustain political support do not translate to legal exoneration. What this moment reveals, beyond the specific facts of one undeclared gift, is a broader question about the standards of financial transparency that Britain applies to those who seek to lead it, and whether the institutions designed to enforce those standards retain the authority and independence to do so regardless of who is under examination. That question does not resolve when the investigations conclude.
it deepens, and the answer that emerges will shape the terms on which the next phase of British political accountability is conducted.